Welcome to the tea shop. I just wanted to give you a pre-intro and let you know that we talk about some sensitive topics in this episode. It's around Calvin's a great storyteller, and he speaks very candidly about suicide and self-harm in his family and his life growing up. So if you are sensitive to that, if it affects you in any way, I just wanted to let you know ahead of time. That's one. The second thing I wanted to share with you guys is that I've known Calvin. We've gone to the same school. I think we're 6 years apart. I'm older, and but never once did I know about any of this going on in his life. We would go in the same bus. He would always be smiling, joking, and then he'd go back to a home life that was not optimal for a young boy or anyone, right, growing up. So I just wanted to. Part of my learning from this podcast is that we do not know the life someone is leading, they are experiencing, the hurt, the fear, the torment that's going on in their hearts. And right, so if your cashier is not smiling today, you go to the restaurant and your server does not smile at you, be a little kind. Listen to Calvin's story. Like I said, I met him in the bus. I met him up at school. We probably punched each other out of fun. We laughed, we joked. I probably took his tennis ball and threw it on top of the building so he would not get it back because he was probably a junior. But at that time, I did not realize what Calvin was going through, right? So that just reminds me, just be a little kinder to the human beside you, right? Ask them how they are doing. Be genuinely interested in their lives. We do not know what they're going through. So with that, let's get to the episode. So.
Calvin D, welcome, dude. I'm getting better at my intros, being very precise. I ramble a lot in my intro, but I want to make it precise. Calvin D, that's all I know about you. Well, I've known you. We've gone to the same schools. We grew up in the same area. Perambur, main road. You can't get more Anglo than that, right? So Calvin D from Madras, Tamil Nadu, Perambur, which I call the capital of Anglos, Anglo-Indians.
I wouldn't disagree.
He's a couple of years my junior. I went to school with his sister, who's also going to be speaking with me, by the way. Calvin and I, we've seen each other in St. Mary's and various schools, but we never really got to know each other. And it's been a while now, so let's get to know Calvin. Calvin, tell us about you. Who are you? Present day Calvin, any interesting facts, and we'll dive in.
Yeah, well, thanks, Conrad. Thanks for having me on. I think I'm more than 2 years younger to you because if you're my sister's classmate, there's a 6-year difference between her and me.
Oh, really?
I assume that's probably going to be somewhere similar between both of us. So I am a bit younger. Calvin D, that's an interesting question when you ask your guest or you ask them, who are you?
Yeah.
And that's something that I think just about every man ponders in their mind.
Yeah.
So I think two questions that you grapple with is who am I and why are you put on this earth? What's my purpose?
Yeah.
And so if I say, my name is Calvin D and my parents are whatever it is, that's me giving you my name, but that's not me telling you who I am.
Yeah.
And if I define and say, I'm an entrepreneur who loves cultivating multiple streams of income, that's again not telling you who I am. That's basically what I do. And then if you throw in roles, a father, husband, son, whatever it be, again, those are just roles and responsibilities. So just to get a little philosophical,
Sure.
because that's one of the subjects that I kind of like, is I think that's something you continue to unravel as you live your life. And but at the essence, I would say, I'm a child of God and I'm put here for a purpose, and that's who I consider myself to be. I think I love throwing out quotes and lyrics. I've been collecting them in my head since 7th grade, and there's a song which says, I am a flower quickly fading, here today and gone tomorrow, a vapor in the wind. Till you hear me when I'm calling and you catch me when I'm falling. I am yours, I am yours. I think that would define me at its core. I'm just a sinner saved by grace and trying to live life one day at a time.
Okay,
That's
you have
a
to.
good answer. Now let me give you
Yes.
an answer that's more in line with the Anglo-Indian community and what you
Sure,
do, right?
sure.
So that's the dichotomy. You get both sides of me. So I grew up, as you said, on Main Road. You can't get more co-Anglo than that. And even when I left India, I was still living on the Main Road. And that's an interesting fact as well, where they say the vast majority of people tend to live and die within a 50-mile radius, marry someone within that 50-mile radius, work within that 50-mile radius, and so forth. But I think that could be an exception to most Anglo-Indians because there's been, I don't know when last you went to Perambur, but there's been a mass exodus of Anglo-Indians.
Yeah.
And there was a time, and when you live on Main Road, especially late 80s, early 90s,
Best era.
when there were no apartments,
Yeah.
I could name you just about every Anglo-Indian house
Yeah.
from the start of
Yeah.
Kavita Bakery and Coronation Bakery, right? And I think for a time you had Marty O'Brien and his family living there. Go a couple of houses away, and then you had Dion and Manfred living there.
Yep.
Another house away, you had the Eustaces living there. And then you had the Couriers where we stayed as well. Then you had Sammy, Rowan, and Ivana, the Rosiers staying up there.
Yep.
Then you had the CSI Church, the Institute, Presentation Convent, and the Catholic Church. And it was the hub of Anglo-Indian activity. So that's where I grew up. My parents, Trevor Dee and Salome Dee, generally when we used to go for a party or a dance, or one of the functions where you have a lot of the Anglos, I generally get asked, are you Trevor's son or are you Brian's son? Because mostly among the D's, you had Trevor Dee, he was the eldest brother, and Brian Dee, who, he traveled and played, and Brian was very popular. So I'm Trevor's son,
Okay.
and I have two sisters. One of them's in the US, not too far from Atlanta, your classmate.
Yeah.
And the other, she's back in Chennai with my mom. So that's a quick historical
Dear.
background.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. So many things. First of all, I know whatever you quoted. What was that? You have to tell me where is that from because I know the words.
Yeah, that's an old song.
It's a
I'm not
song,
sure.
right?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
song.
Okay. Okay. I know that song. Secondly, thanks for throwing out those names, dude. Kavita Bakery, Coronation Bakery,
Yeah.
and naming all the Anglos. I went back in time going for Summerfest, passing all these houses one
Yeah.
after the other. And
Yeah.
I was talking to Alistair Terry recently, and I was saying, like, when I grew up in Perambur, I was in Rangasai Street, not too far from you.
Really? Okay.
But they were like, I could name everybody, and it was in a row, right? There was no separation. It was
Yeah.
Marky Gao, myself, the bosses, Yvette,
Yeah.
Bentley,
Yeah.
right? A whole row of Anglos. I'm sure there are places in Calcutta, but I just joke and say it's the capital, but that was my bubble, and I get to, whoever says it's the capital can claim with their city. I'm claiming mine, right?
Arguably the capital. Yeah. Yeah.
But I love it, man. Thanks for naming all the couriers. I've forgotten about the couriers
Yeah.
even,
So I named one end of the street, the
Yeah.
street facing the carriage works.
Yes.
But the other side of the street, like you said, and on this side of the street, I forgot Kimmy Modis and family.
Modis,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And that's so strange. I think in 2013 when I went to Melbourne, we were going for a gathering. I don't know. I think Father Paul was there, and we went there. And at the door was Kimmy Modis, and she recognized me, and I've never
Dang.
seen her, for like over a decade. And she was like, Calvin. I was like, yeah, just a quick hi to her. But on the other side of the street, you mentioned the Bossos,
Yes.
Carlo and Lynn. But you also had, we shifted that side
Okay.
a little later, and we lived the other side. Then you had the Popleys, you had
Yes.
the Holts,
Yep.
and you had the Pattersons as well, right opposite the church.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, quite a few, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely, man. I love the small town. Since we're talking about houses, right? Did you? I think you were close. Do you remember there was like what everybody said was a haunted house? Nobody lived there. Maybe an old lady lived there. I think it was an old Anglo-Indian lady who lived. It was opposite your house, but going towards Carriage Works it was a little bit rundown with we used to say at least, oh, that house is haunted. It was just an older house. It probably had someone living in there. You don't know if that.
Well, that's interesting that you would say that because the house that I lived in, say from 10 or 11, was
Yeah,
actually a haunted house.
really.
Yeah, it was a haunted house, and this is the house where, again, I missed out somebody else. Cameron Glover, right? He
Yeah,
was my neighbor on the other side of the road. So I'm talking about the house that I lived in
yeah,
was a haunted house, and at that time, I don't think a lot of us gave much thought to stuff like that. It was kind of
yeah.
superstitious or whatever. But we found out the hard way. And I could give you a couple of stories if you want, and
Yes,
I wouldn't
yes,
have any reason to fabricate them. But,
yes.
well, so when, like I said, 10, 11 years old, and we lived in this house, it was a huge house, but the landlord had one bedroom locked and only would allow us to live in one bedroom. So it was mostly, at that time, my eldest sister had left to go and study nursing in Velo. So it was just mum, dad, me, and my younger sister. And so we would manage in that. It was a huge bedroom,
Yeah.
but we could never go into the other room. And whenever I asked my mum, she would say that the landlord, and they were mostly on the ships, so they would rarely come in, had a lot of his goods stored in that room. And so we just took it for granted, okay, he's using that as a warehouse or whatever, a storage space. But then one day when he came, and they were always nice to us, they would give us chocolates and all of that. He said, would you excuse me for a moment? I need to go into that room. And being curious, I hid behind the door and I watched him go into that room. And when he opened up that room, there was hardly any furniture or anything there. It was pretty pristine, even though it was locked for so long. A huge room, empty. And when he finished and went, I said, Mom, there's nothing there. We could easily ask him for that room and it would be, of so much use for us. And I do not know if my parents knew or they were in the blind, but apparently someone had committed suicide in that house or in that room.
Dang. Yeah.
And he didn't want to give us access to that room. And the background for this would be, now when you live near the railway tracks,
Yeah.
it's common knowledge that a lot of people commit suicide.
Yeah.
And at Carriage Works, they would commit suicide. They would come fetch the body, cover them with the sheet, and then take them in that same electric train from Carriage Works to Central, put them in the mortuary. So seeing bodies, or sometimes even seeing a suicide or hearing those screams, or hearing the train stopped and people, was a common sight.
Dang.
And we had this maid who used to work at our place, and she would always caution my mom and dad and say, we lived at the top,
Yeah.
and the Sangs lived at the bottom. And she would often caution us and say, because we would have to go down a flight of stairs, go near a well. I know a lot of the youngsters won't know what a well is. And there was a huge fig tree and all of the pomegranate trees or whatever. And it would get really creepy and dark towards the night. And she would say, don't send the kids late at night to, switch on the motor because whatever, evil spirits and all of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. Now, whether that was true or not, I don't know, but it really scared the living daylights out of me. And I used to, really shiver. But what really is, all of this could be fables, but what started to happen in my life, I started to see that spirit of suicide actually start to penetrate my home. And my childhood was punctuated quite often with attempts of suicide by both my mom and dad. And I'd often say that you take any instrument and it's likely that they've done it. If you take a knife, yeah, they probably tried to do something with a knife. And if you look at jumping in the well, probably tried to do it. Now, one of my dad's lines was he always wanted to jump in front of the train because I used to take the train to school. So he always wanted to jump in front of the train that I was going to catch. And that was traumatic to say the least, because sometimes you'd come back home and you'd find a body on the tracks, and
Yeah.
some of your friends would run and go, hey man, let's see. But your insides would just go boom, because you're wondering, is that dad? And so there were many times, even before I would catch, I think, the 7:30 train or whatever, dad would be on the station at 7, waiting to jump in front of a train. And you'd be in no frame of mind to actually go, because that's what's happening. I've seen my parents douse themselves with petrol and try to immolate themselves. We had to call the neighbors to actually help them come out of it. I've seen, and well, cut a long story short, in the end, my dad eventually did take his life in that very house, in that very room. It didn't come as a surprise because I was actually the last person to see my dad. He did tell me that he was going to kill himself, but I was a couple of months away from 17, and it's just because I've been through that drama so many times
Yeah.
for like over 7 or 8 years. I was like, whatever. I mean, do what you want. And I've seen my dad take out my mom's sari, tie it on the beam, wrap the doors because we had flimsy wooden doors with wire, and then and I exited, and whatever the next day, dad was swinging and all of those things. But we're talking about haunted houses, and I heard from a friend of mine just a few years back was that even after dad took his life in that house, someone else took their life in that very same house.
Man.
And the interesting thing, it wouldn't be just that house content, because I think you spoke about a house with an old lady. I'm not sure on which side of the road. But if you go back, and I won't name names because,
Sure.
and you look at one string of houses on the main road, you'd find multiple suicides taking place in a row.
Yeah.
It's just that some of those deaths would not have been termed suicide because, it's always taboo.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to, say that, someone in the family committed
Yeah.
suicide.
Yeah.
Plus, if when you're in the Catholic faith, when you commit suicide, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as my understanding goes, is they generally do not let the body go to church for burial or whatever it is, because I think they
Yeah.
believe it's a mortal sin, and the person who
Yeah.
killed himself goes to hell, and all of that. So oftentimes you would find the family cover that up just so that they could have a proper last rites and finish things up. But there was a lot of haunted stuff taking place, and
Yeah.
uh, it's not just the fact of suicide. I'll give you one. My dad suffered from, I would say, nightmares would be a little tepid. So late at night, sometimes he would let out these blood curdling shrieks, and that would, when you're a kid, that would
Yeah.
like not just wake you up, but you'd get frozen in bed. And I experienced one of that in that house actually a couple of times. I'll give you one incident. I think dad was going to work late at the night. I was sleeping in his bed. Must have been 12 or 13. And we had huge ceilings. We had this huge cupboard, but the distance between the cupboard and the ceiling must have been 2.5 feet, 3 at most. And so somewhere between 12 and 2 a.m., if I'm right, I wake up and I see a lady. And I know all of this sounds a little bit, you're exaggerating, because generally you talk about the lady in the white sari and the jasmine
Yes.
flowers and all of that. I never
Yes.
seen jasmine flowers, but I seen a lady in a white sari. Didn't see the face, long hair, and the weird thing about that really freaked me out was the lady was sitting on top of the cupboard, and you've probably got place for a child to sit upright, but this lady managed to fit herself between the cupboard and the roof, and she was just sitting quietly and watching me, and I was never religious. I would classify myself mostly in my childhood as being agnostic. But when I seen that, I tried to call the name of Jesus, and my tongue got stuck to my palate, and I froze, and I couldn't even say the name Jesus. And I don't know what they call that, night rigors or night terrors, but thank God, I don't know, it just went away after a couple of minutes. But there was so many incidents, and we never ever considered moving out of that. And I could tell you more haunted stories, but we leave it at that.
Man, that is freaky. Wow. Yeah. I don't know. There was this house. We just would walk. I don't know. It started off as a joke, probably because it was, any old house. We'll just tell your friend it's haunted. But then you just tend to walk a little faster when you pass the house. But also,
I think it's better that we don't, because I don't think we were concerned if there was an intruder
yeah,
or just an evil presence. And I heard that, I don't know, when my aunt asked someone to actually come and pray in that house, after my dad died, that person said, "Look, I'm not going to come there. There's just too much evil in that house." And just, when Dad died, it wasn't just suicide per se. Dad was an atheist. My dad's two favorite sayings were, "Even if Jesus Christ came down, he cannot change me." And the second one was, "Jesus Christ suffered for 3 hours. I'm suffering all my life." So, look, but when Dad died, he took my mom's kajal. That's basically a black eyeliner, and Dad just smothered the wall with a lot of stuff mocking God and some weird sentences like "the graves are calling me" and all of that stuff. And looking back, knowing what I know now,
yeah,
I would say, I mean, if that's not the evidence of demonic activity, then I don't know
yeah,
what is. But so, to answer that question about mosquito hole, so as soon as that happened, we realized we couldn't stay in that house anymore. It wasn't a good environment to bring up young kids, because my youngest sister was 6 years younger to me. And so we decided to move. And we moved not too far away from Mosquito Hall. In fact, a stone's throw. We went from a big house to a very, very small apartment. And I started working at 17, just after my 12, because I wanted to see what I could do to support mom. And we worked in Nittany Decision Services. Now, a lot
yes,
of the Anglo boys who grew up would
yes.
know,
Me too.
Denver and Lucien and all of those boys. And so we would get dropped off. We would come back by train. We would work the night shift, come back by train at 5:30 in the morning, or sometimes even earlier than that. And for me to go to my house, I had to walk through the Mosquito Hall Road, and it's pitch black. There's no lights. And you heard stories even of murder and stuff
Yeah,
over there happening. And like you said, I didn't want to go the Rangasai route, not because of cops, because we were walking,
yeah.
but because of the dogs. And
Yep.
if those are not familiar with Perambur, you have a lot of mad dogs
Mad dogs.
who would literally charge you. So I would take the Mosquito Hall route, and I had just become a Christian a couple of months after my dad passed. And I used to go with a friend of mine, a little elder to me, called Ivan Locker. His name was Ivan Locker. And he would not let me walk down that road alone. And oftentimes we would walk down and we would be just singing songs of praise or just praising God, because that's how creepy it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's one thing to look at another man and whether I can take him or I could, but then it's another thing when you're dealing with diabolical activity. And so,
yeah,
yeah, we.
yeah.
So yes, I would say there's a lot of things that happened in that area, especially
Yeah.
living near the tracks.
Yes.
It's not an experience I would recommend.
Yeah, 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 man. Yeah, that Mosquito Hall was crazy, and that's where all the parties were, though, right? It was a cheap hall. I mean, nobody thought of it. It was just by numbers, you know. But when you said you became a Christian, what does define that? Like, did you, because that could mean like you just progressed in your Catholic faith, or did you can you define that?
Well, I wouldn't say I was religious, so I'll go back just a little bit into my
Sure.
childhood. And if you think I'm going too detailed, please
No,
stop.
no, dude. No, you're doing great.
So, Dad was an atheist. As far as I can remember, I've never seen my dad go to church once. Christmas, New Year, he probably did, because there's a photo of me, whatever, 6'7", and he's in the Lourdes Shrine Grotto with a snap. So he probably did. But as far as I remember, not one Sunday. So Dad was an atheist. And I grew up as a Catholic, attended church just about every single day. But I had an experience during my first Holy Communion in the lead up to that. And I'd say there are certain experiences in life that you consider pivotal, because because they shape the way you think, they shape the choices you make, and how your life pans out. And so you probably know these two nuns who were Sister Yvonne Hussey
Yeah.
and Sister Loretta,
Yeah.
right? Just about everybody knows both of
Yes.
them, and they've passed on. So both of them were in charge of the First Holy Communion class. That's basically the prep before you go for your big day. And that's one of the sacraments for those who are not Catholics. And we were in the fourth grade, whatever that would be, 8 years, 9 years, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And so during the class, one of the things they said, take a few moments, go sit quietly in the church and listen, and God will speak to you. Because tomorrow you're going to be receiving Jesus into your heart. And so all of the kids who wanted to be Catholics and, get there went off. And so did I. And once that time was over, they called up everyone and said, did you hear God? Yes. And whether they were fabricating or not, I
Yeah.
don't know. But I heard God. He said this, he said that. And they asked me. And I said, for the life of me, I never heard anything, And, well, they said, well, the next day you're going to receive the host, the communion. Jesus will come and he'll speak to you here the next day. Well, we went through the process. Nothing. And that frustrated me because I just gave you a background of what was happening in my house. Although
Yeah.
that's just a pinch, there's a lot,
Yeah. Sure.
And I was going through so much turmoil. And here on one hand, they said God would speak to you. And I took the time to actually wait and see whether God would speak to me. And there was nothing. And then you encapsulate Christianity, you've got the cross with Christ and his arms spread out. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand how that could make a difference to me now. And so at that young age, I think an atheistic tendency developed in me. Again, Dad was atheistic. So, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, they say. But as life played out, I would say, now I used to go to church and I used to be an altar boy. One, to hang out with the boys, two, to have a look at the girls. But there was no religious tendency for me to actually go there. My heart was very far away. But I would say, truly, when I often used to climb my roof, lie back, and just stare at the sky because that's the only place I could find peace. And even at that young age, I reconciled that this couldn't be the Big Bang. There had to be some intelligence behind that. And so I would say my belief shifted from being atheistic to being agnostic. And for those who don't know what that is, an atheist is somebody who doesn't believe in God, whereas an agnostic believes that there is a being, he just doesn't know who that is, and he cannot reconcile that to his belief system. So I would say I moved from an atheist to an agnostic. And that's when I, went through the entire thing, lost my dad and so forth. But a month after that, I had someone in my family come up to me and, he tried to, when he spoke about Christ, it seemed oddly different because there was no religious stuff wrapped to it, don't do this and do this and do that. He spoke as if he had a relationship with someone. And I found that interesting. And the way I had a weird experience in this small apartment not too far from Mosquito Hall, I think somewhere in early Feb, I'd say about 1:30 in the afternoon. And for the first time, I was reading my Bible. And I was reading 1 Corinthians 2. And I think in the early part of the verse, there's a verse which says, for he has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and he has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the strong.
Yeah.
And that got me for a bit because my dad favored my elder sister. He always thought she was intelligent, go up and be a doctor, and she's a nurse, and she lived up to that. He was pretty mellow with my younger sister. She was way too young. But a lot of his anger was channeled towards me. And oftentimes he would label me to be foolish or an idiot and all of those things. And so that's what I got from my dad. And when I read 1 Corinthians 2, it said he chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. So that could be me. I've had an earthly father tell me I was a fool. And now I'm reading in the Bible, it says he chose the fool to shame the wise. And so I was like, this sounds a little different. And I kept reading and I came upon 1 Corinthians 2, verse 9 and 10. And it says this, and I quote it from the KJV. It says, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man the very things that God has prepared for them that love him. And something strange happened, and it's difficult to explain a spiritual experience with natural words, but in that moment I seen a couple of things. I seen the future that, my dad kind of prophesied over my life, good for nothing, an idiot, whatever. And then you contrast that with the word of God, where God is saying, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, is the very things that I've prepared for you. Something that's so magnificent. And I realized immediately, as I accepted that's something that God prepared for me, that image of having Christ hanging on the cross doing nothing for you flashed before me. And I never had anyone explain it to me, but I just understood then that I was a sinner and there was nothing that I could actually do to earn my way to heaven, and that Christ took the punishment, took the guilt, took the sin, and it was a substitution. Instead of Calvin being there, Christ was there, and all he was saying is, if you accept me into your heart, that's my heart, you wouldn't need to go through that. And then you have a bright future with 1 Corinthians 2:9. Now, that probably happened within 15 seconds. All of that information, the Bible calls the word of God light. So light just flooding your understanding. And it dawned on me the essence of what the crucifixion was all about. And so in what a 17-year-old boy could do, I think that's just going to turn 17, just got on my knees and said, Lord, I've lived a life which, atheist, agnostic and all of that, but come in and, help me live life better. And I think that I would credit that experience to being fundamental in changing my worldview and the path of my life. And have I lived a good Christian life? I don't think so, but I get up and try every day. So does that answer the question?
Whew, man,
Christian,
I
yeah.
was getting goosebumps. That's such a great story, and you're a great storyteller, man. It's you have a yeah. That's such a great story. Thanks for sharing, man. That is so great. So, but how would you? So you're still a Roman Catholic, or is it a non-denominational denomination?
I don't really subscribe to any denomination, Conrad, but
Okay.
I have lots of friends who are Catholics.
Yeah.
I've not been to a Catholic church, like regular attending
Sure.
since that experience, because while I respect their beliefs,
Yeah.
I just feel that my faith changed, and I'm more interested in exploring something where the Word of God is taught a little more in depth, and
Yeah.
where the teachings and the practices are a little more in line with my beliefs and how I consider the interpretation of the Word of God. So, yes, but I wouldn't label myself to be a Protestant or a
Yeah.
Pentecostal or anything. Just,
Yeah.
I just like to keep the relationship with God simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why complicate it, right? It's a simple thing like God, I love you, and have a relationship with you, and that's about it. And
Yeah.
anything else complicates it.
Yeah.
Man, so wow, so that is you don't forget things like that, right? Right. It does not stop impacting you. If all else fails, you can go back to that moment, and right when doubt creeps in, if all else fails, right, you can go back to those moments, those pillars in your life, right? Those moments in your life that you can look back and say, that's as low as I go in my belief or my unbelief, right? That's where it stops. I'm always going to bounce back from there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you go through life and you come out of a childhood that has been rather traumatic, just because you go through an experience like that with God or whatever, you still have to deal with a lot of those
Yeah.
nightmares and demons and patterns that have actually occupied your mind and in many ways form your personality. But your faith becomes an anchoring point. Like they teach so much in school, from first grade to 10th and all of that. But I think one of the fundamental things that they lack is cultivating a worldview or a state of beliefs that actually guide you. And I think one of the reasons you find in the world, oscillating from, from he, him, and to she, her, and in between, and all of those things, is because your belief system actually, gets messed up. You get a virus in and it really squanders. And that could be any experience in your life. But
Yeah.
I've always come back to the fact that no matter how far I stray or slip or stumble, that God is for me, because when He did save me, the scripture says He knew the end from the beginning. He knew all of my days ahead of me, knew all of the stuff that I would do, and still in His mercy, He chose to save me. And that I draw strength from that. And I draw strength from something else that this friend of mine who actually helped introduce Christ to me, he said this to me. He said, never forget this, that it's not just you holding God's hand and walking, because sometimes when you have that belief, when life gets tough, sometimes you find your hand slipping. But he said, Calvin, remember, it's a two-way street, that Christ holds your hand. So when your hand slips, remember his hand won't. And that's helped carry me through a lot of trials and tests and tribulations and all of those things. So, yeah.
Whew, man. So, wow, man, that was that's yeah. That I love those kinds of stories, those pivotal moments. Where your life could have gone either way, right? At that point in time,
Yeah,
it was
it, it,
it's crazy to think.
it's very true, because there's another scripture which says, many are the plans in a man's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose which will
Yeah,
stand. And at the start, I said, there's two questions. Who am I, and what's
yeah,
the reason
yeah,
I've been put on the earth? And I think the second question you can correlate to that scripture, and you realize that I'm not going to try to live my life based on my understanding. I want to do this and I want to do that, and you just try to commit your life the best you can to God,
yeah,
and let God navigate your life
yeah,
to the things that He wants you to do, and you find a lot more fulfillment doing that. I would have I would have never considered myself to be somebody who would get into the entrepreneurial world.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
most Anglo Indians, when you grow up, the school system is such that you get
yeah,
a job, you pay the bills,
yep,
and that would have been my pattern. But through a series of weird incidents,
yeah,
yeah, turned out to go into a different direction. So
yeah,
coming back to all of that, yes, I think it's a lot more interesting to live life knowing that you have a purpose that's being guided from above. Now, some might call that being, you're weird, or you're just out there, but I choose to believe that and try to live one day
yeah,
at a time,
yeah,
doing what I feel
yeah.
God wants me to do. Yeah.
So you went to St. Joseph's, and if people don't know, St. Joseph's is the local school. Calvin probably, it took him probably 5-10 minutes at the most. If he walked slow, if he kicked stones on the way and slowed him down, it would take him like 10 minutes. But otherwise, it's like super close. All of Perambur would, like, at whatever time, would just start walking the streets like zombies, going to school at that same school, and some would
Yeah.
carry on to the bus stop, which is farther than that. So again, Anglo capital of the world. So you went to St. Mary's right after that?
Yes. Because
Awesome.
St. Joseph's would only do till fourth grade for boys,
Yes.
and then most of them went to St. Mary's. My dad went to St. Mary's, and it
Oh,
was,
really?
yeah, it was one of the premier schools for boys
Yes.
back in the day. I don't know
Yeah.
if it is still.
Yeah. So St. Mary's. So how were you? How were you in St. Mary's? Were you a good student, or were you just? What was your favorite subject? What like? And also, I'm not sure if they had it in your class, but in St. Mary's they had these life coaches. I don't know what to call them, career coaches, and they asked us like, "What would you like to do?" And most people wrote like doctor, dentist, or whatever. If they ever had that, what was your answer? And like, yeah, how were you as a student in St. Mary's?
Well, I don't think they had it for us. Probably maybe for one period, somebody may have asked you to write that
Yeah.
down. But yeah, in St. Mary's, I would think we were the last batch of Anglo Indians that actually went through the system, because after that, the Anglo-Indians really started to, either they were going to different schools or they were just no longer migrating or whatever. But as far as I could remember, that was the last batch of Anglos that actually went through that. And we had a great set of Anglo-Indian teachers at that time. Just about every class
Yeah.
had an Anglo-Indian teacher. And I do believe that made a huge difference
Yeah.
to our education. I would say, man, looking back, of the kind of, well, student, let me address it from both sides. One in terms of being scholastic, and the
Sure.
other in terms of just being, a kid on the block. So, in terms of studies, I was never a topper, but I was never at the bottom as well. There was just too much happening in school for me to be, oh, I'm sorry, too much happening at home for me to
Yeah.
be, trying to hit grades and whatever. And our parents and my parents really never made it a big deal for, you got to be an A top or whatever it is. I remember, I think it was my 10th grade, and I wasn't studying. Most people try to cram
Yeah.
10th
Yeah.
and 12th are the biggest
Yeah.
exams, and I wasn't studying. And my mom came to me and she said, "What's happening?" And I said, "I think I was reading storybooks, probably a Louis Lama or Jeffrey Arthur."
Jeffrey Archer, man. Yes.
So, so I said to her, just leave me alone. You want a first class, I'll get you a first class. And I got her a first class. So that would sum up my education.
Okay.
I knew what I was capable of, but I
Yeah.
just wouldn't put in the effort because there was just too much stuff happening. There was no
Yeah.
environment to cultivate a mindset where you would actually go and achieve things, be it academic or non-academic.
Yeah.
Uh, but in terms of what kind of kid I was, looking back, man, I did things in school. I don't know if I should say certain things, but I leave names out.
Okay.
So yeah, but anyone who studied in St. Mary's will know what I'm talking about. Um, so there was a master in school who was
Okay.
considered.
I already think I know.
What I'm
Okay.
saying. So this guy was considered to be a homosexual
Yeah.
who preyed on students, and so sometimes he would keep the boys, the Anglo boys or whatever, back for coaching, special coaching,
Yeah.
and then he would do weird stuff with them. And for some reason, these boys would come back and were like, "Man, this guy is a mess, and he did this and whatever." So I think this is between 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So me and another mate, I won't mention his name as well, but and we were talking about this just maybe a month back or so when he called me. So outside during lunch, we would we would gather these guys who have been abused or allegedly abused or whatever, and we would start our version of the Phil Donahue show. Right? I don't know if you know Phil Donahue,
Yes,
but
Phil
yeah, you
Donahue,
do,
the
right? Okay.
greats, the
Yeah.
silver fox.
Yeah. So the Phil Donahue show, because that was what was popular at the time. And
Yeah.
so my friend and myself would interview them, and we would get an audience of another 7 or 8 people who would sit around us. And we would ask crazy questions just to get a laugh. And sometimes we wouldn't be able to complete the interview because, but at the time, we wouldn't know whether we were traumatizing the
Yeah.
person further, or
Yeah.
technically it would be probably classified bullying as well.
Yeah.
But in our hearts,
Yeah.
we didn't consider ourselves to be bullies. For us, it was just fun or to get to
Yeah.
the bottom of that. And for me, when you have a home environment that's filled with sadness and pain, to come to school and have a laugh was
Yeah.
was a relief. But I guess if you're a psychologist, you'd probably put that down to weird thinking,
Yeah.
taking out your pain on someone else.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, but
Yeah.
so I would say I would fit into that category where I wasn't the most popular guy in school, but we still had our own clique. We still had fun,
Yeah.
and we always found it interesting to go back to school to play. And
Yeah.
in studies, I mean, I would get whatever marks. Although, yeah, my most interesting subject in school, I would say a combination of history and geography, but not really from a textbook standpoint.
Okay.
History, because I think, what's the quote which says, I mean, if you don't learn from history, history repeats
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
So I think I found stuff, concerning Hitler and all of those things fascinating. It's one of my goals to actually go to Auschwitz and go into that museum. They say when you get there and you come out, you'll never be the same. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things I want to do. I probably want to go to the killing field in Cambodia as well, where
Yeah.
Pol Pot wiped out, 250,000 of his population and all of that. So from a historical standpoint, those are the things that actually trigger me. I've loved geography as well. Mr. Santinier used to teach that.
Santinier, yes.
Yeah, I think he's in Melbourne still. I've seen a picture of him recently, so he's doing well. But he was a good teacher. But geography, again, not really from a textbook standpoint. I
Yeah.
have a globe on my desk. I love to travel. I love to see different parts of the world, enjoy different cultures, and actually immerse myself into a place where they don't speak your language and you can feel embarrassed just ordering food. But that's the experience, and I've had the opportunity to do that in quite a few countries. So history and geography till the 10th grade for those reasons. But in the 12th, I started feeling a pull towards commerce. And we had a great teacher over there.
Did
He
you
was a
do
very
12th, 11th, 12th in St. Mary's as well?
11th and 12th in St.
Okay.
Mary's. And my dad passed away 1 month or 1.5 months before my 12th standard exams. And I was in no frame of mind to study. And like I said, I just got saved before my 17th birthday. So again, I had this habit when exams came, I tended to read other things. And I said Archer and Louis Lammer in 10th grade. But once I met Christ, I was reading the Bible a lot more, in the lead up to my 12th standard exam. And I received a massive surprise when someone said, you topped commerce with 196 and 200
Oof.
in your 12th grade. And I was like, is that true? Yeah, your name's up there. And I was like, yeah, I never studied much, but just I felt a pull towards commerce and business and all of those things. I just find it fascinating how the human mind works.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's perfect. We can definitely I want to jump around some more, but I think that leads into I love talking to entrepreneurs in general. I love it even more when I talk to Anglo-Indian entrepreneurs, if you haven't watched a previous episode of mine, I was speaking with this guy, Jeff Rigo,
Yeah.
and he's so humble. You could not tell. He's just an Anglo you meet at a tea shop, and he'll smile and he'll talk to you, say hello. If you're younger, we would say hello, uncle, or whatever. He's not that much older than us, but he has pioneered stuff in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah.
And he has sold like 7 businesses to IBM and Amazon and stuff like that, right? And so because it's fascinating to me because, again, in my bubble, it might not be true. In my bubble, I just did not see entrepreneurs, right? We saw to the traditional jobs, and that was it. So our multiple choice was very limited, and entrepreneurs seemed like almost like astronauts for me, right? So and when I love and I want to talk with you about your entrepreneurial spirit, right? What was the first thing that got you excited? Like, yes, this is something I can do, and I want to do.
Do you want the long story or the short story?
Dude, you're a great storyteller. I'll just keep quiet and listen.
So, let me see, where do I start? Yeah, so I went into the path of, being an employee. And I would say 2002, 2003, I was working with TCS. And they sent me on my first trip overseas, and I went to the UK. I was working with Barclays as a business analyst over there. And at that time, came back. I liked the UK. My sister was in the UK at that time. I met her there as well. And I came back and was like, man, I'm done with India. I really like
Yeah.
the UK. And I was, I think I was engaged at that time to this girl, and I was like, why don't you try for a working holiday, make a visa, go to the UK, and then I'll apply for a working holiday, make a visa, and I'll join you. And so she did, got a visa, went to the UK. And I was so confident that I would get a visa because I've already been there, that I resigned my job at TCS and applied for the visa. I didn't know nothing. I was wet behind the ears, 23 years. And so the visa officer says, look, man, you don't have a job. There's no collateral that you're actually going to come back. You probably get a job over there. And so he rejected my visa, and I was taken aback because uh, not my wildest dreams did I consider A, asking God, is that your will for me to go there? And B, I never considered I'd get my visa rejected. So I came back and applied again, reapplied, and I got rejected the second time. And now I was in a mess. One, because I sent my fiance over there and I couldn't join her. And
Yeah.
two, I no longer had a job. And so that must have been 2003, 2004, somewhere in between. And I tried to get a job after that, but I just couldn't get a job. No matter how much I tried, no matter how many doors I knock on. There's another scripture which says, the door that God shuts, no man can open. And I remember, I'm giving you the in-depth story. I remember one day driving on the streets of Chawarnaga, and I heard something deep in me. And the reason I don't believe that's me, that was God, is because I never put the phrase together, and I heard something in my spirit which said, pray for the wisdom of entrepreneurship. And I was like, all right, maybe tonight. And I was like, no, go home and do it. And I was driving a Honda. That's a bike, not a car. So go home, I pray for the wisdom of entrepreneurship, and you'd think, boom, wave the magic wand, and tomorrow you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I just read a quote today which said, if you only knew the distance between amen to here it is, you'd quit. Say that again. If you only know the distance between amen and here
Yeah.
it is, you'd quit. And that's true. So I prayed for the wisdom of entrepreneurship, but I just couldn't get a job at all. And so now you lose confidence as a man when you can't work. You lose confidence when you keep getting rejected over and over again,
Yeah.
especially when you pair it with the background of where I came from and my dad kind of rejecting me and, speaking words. And you've got my fiance over there and all of those things happening. And so I convinced her to come back to India. It took some doing, but she came back. Now she came back, and she was without work, and her dream was out because she loved me enough to come back. And well, we've been engaged for quite a bit now, and so we wanted to get married. And so when I asked her mum, she said, "Yeah, I'm happy to give my daughter to you on one condition: you get a job."
Okay.
So I asked for having a job, and yeah, but as much as I could try, I couldn't get a job. And we ended up taking the plunge to get married without work. No work for her, no work for me. I wouldn't advise it
Yeah.
because it can cause the most stressful situation. That's what happened. And well, I'll fast forward a little bit. And so when you constantly get rejected, I ended up turning to the bottle. And my dad was an alcoholic. I don't want to mention other alcoholics in my family, but alcoholism ran through, and I started drinking really heavy. So I would drink in the morning, pass out, get up in the evening, drink, pass out. And when I say pass out, pass out. And this went on for quite a while. And my mom used to subscribe to a Christian magazine. I'll leave the name. I will not mention the name. And when, like I said, I've been a voracious reader and always loved to leaf through something. And I remember a couple of times I read this magazine. It was in English, and the English was so poor. And it used to bug me. So after about 2, 3 months, and there was this afternoon again, I was sloshed, picked up the magazine, it was rubbish. And so they had an email there. So half drunk, typed an email and said, look, English is my first language. With due respect, your English is not good. And I'm willing to, edit and clean up your magazine free of charge. Because I was doing nothing,
Yeah.
right? Send it off, never heard from them. I think 2, 3 weeks later on a Saturday evening, about 5:30, was about to take, I think my wife at that time out, and the phone rings, and I pick up the phone, and this guy from that particular organization calling me. He was a director of media, and he said, "I'd like to meet you." And now their office is about an hour 20 minutes from where I live. Okay, it's peak summer. Now I'm doing something for free, and while I'm a generous guy, I'm not willing to make that trip in the sun all the way to meet you. And I tried to, tell him, look, I mean, send it over the email, I'll do it for you. But he was very persistent. He said, no, we'd like to meet you. And then he said something that I still wasn't going. And then he said something that kind of struck my ego. He said, we'll pay for your petrol prices. I'm sorry, we'll pay for your petrol.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. That's fair enough. But
Yeah.
coming from the fact that I never had a job, been rejected so many times, it was like the way I took it was like, you can't afford it, so I'll give you the money.
Yeah.
And that kind of insulted my pride or whatever. I was like, you know what? I'll come and I'll pay for my own petrol. That's whatever, pride and ego speaking. So anyway, I decided, yeah, I'm doing that long drive. I don't want to do it alone. I said to my wife, we'll sit. I dressed reasonably well. I tend, and I walked in. So I was expecting to meet this guy. And he said, hang on for a couple of minutes and I'll introduce you. Uh, so when he brought me in, I walk into a boardroom and there's six people sitting around a conference table. And he said, well, that's the director of HR, this is the director of finance, and this is the director of administration. And these are all directors. I'm like, what am I doing here? And so he says, look, I know you spoke about the magazine and all of those things. And he said, we are really happy for you to do that and we'll pay you. So I was like, wait, I don't have any work. These guys are going to pay me. Wasn't a lot of money, but
Yeah.
beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah.
So the money was coming in. But he said the real reason we wanted you to come in here was we want you to work on a project. And he named the person that if I said his name, everyone would know that. And he said we wanted you to come in studio. We want you to work with him and whatever. We wanted you to do a certain project. I was like, wow, I didn't expect any of this. And I flipped out and said, that'll cost you a lot. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. And he says, how much would that be? And I said, could you give me a minute? I'll go and speak to my wife. I'm already enjoying a life where, I'm getting sloshed or whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
but I could use the money. Go to my wife and say, I don't know what they want, but whatever. I'm going to quote a figure that, either they're probably going to tell me no. So I take about 5 minutes, come in and said, look, yeah, I can get it done for you. I'll take X amount of time and I said a six-figure sum. An INR, whatever, but six figures
Yeah.
is still
Yeah.
6 figures back in
Yeah.
2005 or whatever. And it took them about 2 minutes and said deal. So I walked out of there with, 6-figure contract plus a regular contract to actually get things done in the magazine. And so I wouldn't say that's natural, I say coincidences when God performs
Yeah.
a miracle and decides to be anonymous about it.
Yeah.
So I would put that down
I
to
love
God
that.
actually opening a door for me. And then that birthed something interesting as well. Do you want another story?
Dude, keep going, man.
Entrepreneurial thing. So I like to run multiple streams of income. But this stream where it went into writing was that was a seed that started to blossom and then
Yeah.
became big, and at least for me. So what happened was when I was she's not my wife, but when I was dating this girl, we were best friends. And so I used to share a lot with her. And while I was praying, I felt, remember, I'm 20, whatever, 22, 23. So you're interested in like whatever, getting married at that time
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of that thing. So I felt in my heart a pull towards a Jewish girl, right? Now, explain why I can't.
Yeah.
It's just that when you meditate and ponder, you get certain thoughts popping. And some of that, they say it's put down to your pizza last night. And
Yeah.
some of that could actually
Bad
be God.
biryani.
Yeah, it's up to you to actually be able to
Yeah.
discern and divide and use your own perspicacity to figure out what exactly, is God. And so I went and told my best friend, it was this girl, that I feel, I think God wants me to marry a Jewish girl. Not knowing at that time that this girl was in love with me, or if she wants to
Yeah.
play it down, say I have feelings for me. So I shared that with her, and she was like, "Yeah, this guy is, he's gone or whatever." And that didn't pan out because obviously I didn't marry a Jewish girl. I married, a girl from on the same street that I lived in. And like I said, 50-mile radius and all of that,
Yeah.
right? So I married her, and the Jewish thing never happened. But 12 months to the date after getting married, a Jewish woman did come into my life. But she didn't come in the form of a romantic relationship. She came in the form of a business relationship. So I thought of one thing,
Yeah.
but it worked out another thing. And I would say, there are relationships that really make you or break you, to put it in simple terms. And I would say in business as well, well, in anything in life, Conrad,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
be successful is when you cultivate a relationship that goes on. You know, for a marriage and a good family, it only happens when you put in the work, and 5 years become 10, 10 become 15, 15 become
Yep.
20, and so forth. Just to digress, here in Adelaide, we celebrated a couple of our friends, both their parents celebrated their golden jubilee, 50 years. And I was speaking to another friend and said, how often does that happen?
Yeah.
When we were growing up, you would see a lot of 50 years or
Yeah.
silver anniversaries, 25 years. How often do you see it happening now? Because
Yeah.
the family is
Yeah.
fragmented,
Yeah.
divorce is so common. And yeah, so I was just saying that you have to cultivate relationships that do the distance, be it in your personal life or with family or with marriage, or be it in the business world, because the art of actually scaling a business, or the art of making revenue consistently, is
Yeah.
cultivating repeated customers or building a
Yep.
relationship. And so this lady was instrumental in me continuing to run a business and do lots of things. And I've been working from home long before COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done entrepreneurial stuff for now 18 years, coming on to 19. And so that's one key relationship that helped foster the business. Just
Yeah.
came in, and we
Yeah.
started small. Initially, it was just doing business to pay your utility bills, and then
Mm.
it grew up. Yeah, but I would factor two business relationships, one with her and another with a Spanish guy who, um, you got time for that story?
Yes. Go for it.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
So so because I grew up without a dad, and I did well in commerce, I my mom said, go to college, I'll pay the bills. It doesn't matter. You can quit
Did you go to
working.
Loyola?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I just didn't think it would be right, because I felt that pull towards business. I just didn't think it would be right for me going to college and having someone teach me about business who has never run a business, doesn't know what it is to do sales and
Yeah.
get rejected,
Yeah.
doesn't know what it is to actually go out and try to recruit and convince people to join your company, manage attrition rates. Somebody who doesn't know anything about operations, doesn't know how to be, strapped for capital, and then all of those things. And
Yeah.
if somebody who just wants to leaf through the pages of a textbook and teach me business, to me that didn't make sense. I'm a pretty practical guy. I can learn theory, but I'm more interested if you say, this is what I did,
Yeah.
this is how you can do it, let me show you how. I learn from you, and it's easier for me to respect you that way, because it's easier to learn from someone you respect, someone
Sure.
you just have to.
Yeah.
So, so I didn't want to go to college. But my mother convinced me to do correspondence and all of that. But one of my prayers was that God would send me a mentor who would, teach me the ropes of doing business. And so again, while I was running this business with, you know, on this front, I decided that I would get into the consulting world as well. And long story short, this company, they were just operating out of a business center. The head of it was a Spaniard, lives in the US. He's in Massachusetts now. His name was Jose. I'll keep the last name unmentioned. And he took a chance on me. He hired me, and the company was at 30 people then, and he hired me as the learning and development head. And this was a
Okay.
company that dealt with something I had no idea about,
Yeah.
leather and footwear. And, I have no idea about that. And why would you
Yeah.
hire me as the, learning? Probably because they said my English was kind of all right, so I could teach people and communicate. But I joined, and we ended up scaling that company from 30 people all the way up to 300 people. And I wore multiple hats during that.
Whoa. What was the
Uh,
time frame?
um, about 5 to 6 years.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty
And
quick.
and
Yeah.
we sustained it for a bit, for a couple of years as well. So I ended up wearing multiple hats. I ended up starting their first website, which was like, crazy, whatever it is, but you got to start somewhere. And
Sure.
the good thing with that was they gave me the freedom to do things, and he mentored me. He was a really tough mentor. I
Yeah.
remember the first time I met him. I met him with the operations head, and he said, "Come to a hotel, Marriott, which was on Mount Road, because we were running a business center." So he said, "Come to the hotel room, and we go over there." And I've joined the company for maybe a couple of months, and he suddenly turns his attention to me, and he has a deep voice, and he's a tough guy because he's been in the tanneries in Russia and all of those things, and really, and it's the first time he's interacting with me, and he says, "So, what happens if the guys that you're training, they come in late? What do you do?" And I said, "Well, we give them a warning." And he says, "So what happens if a couple of days later they come in late again? What do you do?" I said, "Well, we give them a stern warning." So he said, "What happens if a couple of days later they come in late again?" So I have no idea where he's going with this. So I
Yeah.
said, we write them a memo. And then he turns around and he screams that probably, two floors down and two floors up they'd heard. And he says, and pardon me for using a bad word, but I'm just
Sure.
verbatim telling you what he said. And he said, "What? Calvin, are you the how many times will you let that happen?" And so I was taken aback because I generally don't let anyone swear at me, irrespective of, how much money you have or whatever. And
Yeah.
that's the only time he's ever, well, he didn't swear directly at me, but, and I said to him, "What do you expect me to do?" And then he said, "Well, you cut their fucking salary." And so I said to him, "Well, I didn't know I had the power to do that."
Yeah.
And so I guess maybe that line or whatever let him know that I was pretty green in so many things. And he took it upon himself to teach me different things about business and wearing different hats. Some of it directly because we were on the leadership team and he mentored us, but some of it you learn because you're just observing
Yeah.
of how a man reacts to criticism, how he
Yeah.
reacts under pressure, and you absorb some of those traits. Some of it you absorb the good trait, and some of it
Yeah.
you absorb the bad traits. Because for a period of time, my voice at home was like his voice, and when I got angry, the decibels would go up, and
Yeah.
that was difficult for
Yeah.
both my kids as well as my
Yeah.
wife. But I would definitely I definitely owe a lot to him
Yeah.
for mentoring me and teaching me
Yeah.
discipline, how to run a business. Yeah.
Those people, man, I totally relate to that. I had many people in my life, but most recently, you know, he's not a stern guy, but a really good mentor, a high achiever, high achiever. He's a TED talker, right? Not TEDx, right? Really high achiever. And working with him, he got me to a level that I did not know I could get to. You
Yeah.
know, I get goosebumps. It's the best year of my life that I spent working with him.
Yeah.
Those people are like, just, I hope everybody, and even for you, right? At 22, 23, praying for a mentor is not a common thing. Not many 23-year-olds in India at that point in time, because we had different aspirations. Now it's changing. I think we're a little bit more
Yeah.
aspirational, right? But that's an odd thing, I would say. Not many people ask for a mentor at 22, 23.
Yeah.
So you had that drive, and I think meeting someone like that, I really, really hope, if you don't have a mentor, guys, go find. I think it's the tough people. Don't run away from them. They
Yeah.
will challenge you, and you will rise to another level, and it'll change your life. Like who was I don't know who I was listening to, another podcast, right? He said, like, who made you a better person? The biggest hard ass in your life, who pushed you and yelled at you. Maybe not yelling is not the right thing, but they forced you into to get to a new level. And I'm so glad that you had that experience, man, because I had it too, and I cannot, like I tell you, change my life, change my outlook. But it'll ruin you, because now you expect a lot from other
Oh,
people,
yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think also, coming back to what you just said, it also comes back to mindset.
Yeah,
Because when they come down hard on you, it can break you. And I've seen many a person actually leave that company because they found it either too difficult to work with
yeah,
Jose, or he just couldn't, they were just too weak for him, and he would get rid of them. So I think sometimes when you come down too hard on some people, it breaks them because they don't have the mental forte to be able to stand against that. And then it could plunge them into depression or could plunge them into
Yeah.
anxiety or build an inferiority complex and so forth. Oh, so it really depends on the person as well. But I think with my childhood and my background, going through some of the stuff that I've gone through, I often say to myself when I face a challenge, is that I faced worse than this. And I
Mm.
faced it
Yeah.
as a kid.
Yeah.
And I faced it without knowing Christ. Obviously,
Mm.
God's mercy and grace helped me,
Yeah.
but I've got a lot more going on, in my life right now. I got people who love me, I have my faith and belief in God. And you can go through challenges, although it looks to break you, but you can push through that
Yeah.
just because of what you've been through. But yeah, having a mentor makes a huge difference. And I don't know how you feel about this. Speaking about mentors, I think probably mentors are becoming even more important today because of the absence of fathers, the absence of good fathers.
Yeah.
Now, if you turn the clock back and go back a few decades, where the family was a unit and you had a good dad who would who would be the example of a man who would get up, go to work, who would be there for his kids, who would you know despite his challenges, he would look at you and smile and you say, Dad, how are things? And you're like, yeah, all right, everything's
Yeah.
good. But he could have just had the worst day in the
Yeah.
office, but he's got to be strong for his family.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you look up to a dad like that, you learn, as I said, just through observation, even if he isn't teaching you. But then
Yeah.
if you have a dad who actually invests time in you and teaches you lessons, and he becomes your mentor, that's why
Yeah.
you have a lot of, sports stars and
Yeah.
people who've actually made it in life. A lot of times they would credit their dad,
Yep.
and sometimes they would credit their mom.
Yep.
But today, because you don't have that family life happening, and
Yep.
oftentimes kids are shuttled. And again, I'm not coming down because I'm sure there could be people who who are in that situation, but I'm saying
Sure.
when you don't
Yeah.
have that, or you have
Yeah.
an absentee dad, the least you should do is try to get yourself a mentor.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
there are programs where you can actually pay money and
Yeah.
sign up for a mentor or master class.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, you could probably pray and trust God to actually send you a mentor. But then again, you got to be careful because a lot of times you get mentors who are actually
Yeah.
predators who come
Yeah.
in the form of actually teaching you and mentoring
Yeah.
you, but they always have an agenda.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's important for you to be able to discern that. I heard a
Yeah.
quote this morning which said, deception is crazy because it's your worst enemy coming as your best friend. So you got to be careful of that because don't just open yourself up to any
Yeah.
mentor because
Yeah.
everybody has an agenda. But
Yeah. Yeah.
even Jose, part of it was for me to be able to contribute and help grow the company. So
Yeah.
I mean, while he
Yeah. Yeah.
mentored me, I
Sure.
did give back as well.
Sure.
But I will always credit that individual. But yeah,
Yeah.
for young Anglo Indians coming up, a lot of you've interviewed quite a few people who are
Yeah.
musicians and so forth. I'm sure they have
Yes.
mentors that they look up to, but it's
Yep.
in that field.
Yep.
So whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you are whatever, find somebody who you can emulate and
Yep.
respect, and then it makes the journey a little bit easier because you can learn in life through pain or through experience. Getting a mentor is basically learning through experience and
Yep.
avoiding the pain the best you can.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And I would encourage the men of a certain age who are older, like mentor the next generation.
Yeah.
Watch out for the next Calvin, right? He might not look like Calvin is right now. He might, but I think it's like I was reading a book about the stages in a man's life. Um, First we're like the adventurer, and then we're the collector, and at certain point in time you should have collected. It's almost like collecting, like a squirrel collecting all its nuts. Now you have that, you're sitting on top of your pile right now. It's time to turn around and just give back.
Yeah.
Invest in that, and a lot of the people I spoke with do that. Find successful people, find people with drive, and ask them. I bet, like the people with drive and people with most likely are going to, like I tell my kids, right? Go and ask some relative who's an expert. Like I have a brother-in-law who's an expert mechanic, right? And my daughter recently got a car. I said, you know, if you go and ask, say, uncle, can you teach me how to do this on my car? Like, he's going to drop everything and say, this youngster is asking me for something and I'm related to her. I will teach you, absolutely. So, you know, if you find someone who's successful, if you're younger, right, most people are super excited to impart their knowledge and share. So don't hesitate. The art of asking, right? Like, you walked in and you said, that number, right, for the magazine,
Yeah.
and right, and that, just the art of asking, you know, ask well, learn how to ask, and get some confidence, dude. So what else? Multiple streams, or like, are you a serial? Have you sold businesses, or are you just trying to keep it all and kill it off, or
Yeah,
what's your?
I haven't sold a business yet because I just like to keep the
Yeah.
income streams open and let them come in, and they change over time. Sometimes
Yeah.
you get some businesses pumping in 80% and some
Yeah.
20%, and then it flips.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's always interesting being an entrepreneur, the challenges you face. I think for me, so there are different business models that you can use to run depending on what. I've had people ask me, why don't you start like a retail business and open out something here, and whether it's a coffee shop or a pizza shop and all of that. But I've never been somebody who would be into brick and mortar. That's just not. I was at This was when my first daughter was born. I was attending a Tony Robbins conference in Singapore, Unleash the Power Within, and I was sitting at Changi, and I just had this picture of a laptop and notes, dollars. Actually, and remember, I'm in India, dollars coming out of it. And again, I mean, it depends, whether you're seeing things or you feel that,
Sure.
it's like a prophetic image or whatever. But I took that to heart. And that's always been what I've done, a digital business. And
Yeah.
even back in India, I've never worked with Indian clients apart from that magazine thing.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I've generally never worked with Indian clients. I'm very selective on the clients that I work with, and I've that picture did come true because I started earning in dollars, and when you're earning dollars sitting in India,
Yeah.
you quickly scale your business, especially if you go back in time when the dollar was 1:50, 1:55. Back, I mean, that's way too long back. It's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
8 now or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
it really scaled up. So yeah, so even when I was consulting with Jose, I got paid in US dollars. So that's whenever you talk about scaling your business, there's so many ways to scale your business. But one of the ways you can scale it is just change up your currency and work with a higher currency. So if you're in the US, you don't have a lot of options. It's probably the GBP or the Kuwaiti
Yeah.
dinar, which is the highest currency in the world. And so in terms of business, I like to keep it open, and I run digital businesses. And the biggest one of the interesting things that I've been over the past few months trying to get fixed in my head is that the correlation between time and revenue has widened so much.
What do you
You know,
mean?
um, if you read some of the news in India, the former CEO of Infosys, Narayan Murthy, one of the things that caused a lot of controversy on social media was when he said he was started pushing for a 70-hour work week, right? And he's for employees, but he's doing the opposite of what exactly is happening in the world, whether it be
Yeah.
AI or whether it be just the way you think. You no longer have to put in that much time in order to
Yeah.
make that much money. In fact, like I said, it's separated even more now. You could get onto a trading platform and set a trade and walk away depending on how much you have in your account. And in 15 minutes, again, depending on your account, you could
Sure.
have earned $300 in 15 minutes. And what did
Yeah.
you do? Press a button.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if you get it wrong, you could lose
Yeah.
$300. But I'm just saying, you
Sure.
make money no longer by trading time. It's just through a press of a button. Or you flip that over into crypto,
Yeah.
and your revenue can be exponential. So
Yeah.
I've never been a believer in the brick and mortar. It's not my cup of tea. And second, I don't believe in building businesses where you're scaling in terms of people. Like I want to have 30 employees, 40 employees. Um, I've headed up talent acquisition for a number of years, and I know there's a lot of hassles that go into recruitment and managing people and all of that. So I like to keep it as lean as possible. Obviously, your ROIs become, a lot more interesting, and work with digital businesses, digital assets,
The
where
investment is also not that much. It's
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Your risk to reward is not
yeah,
that much as well.
yeah.
And for a lot of my life, I've done business even without a website. And the only times I would be forced to put up a website because, like I said, my clients generally, I'm selective with who I take and vet in the process. The only time I would have put up a website would be actually if I attended a trade show or a conference and I wanted to just, do a little bit of cold sales and see it's what
Yeah.
you need. But yeah, but other than that, just digital businesses is more
So
my cup of
what
tea.
kinds like I know you do a lot of writing. Is that still something you do?
Yeah,
Is that one of your things?
yeah. I've always been fascinated with words, and one of the reasons I got into writing. Uh, you want one more story?
Sure, do it.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard of. I don't know if you heard of J. Abraham, but back in the day, J. Abraham was one of the top consultants in the world,
Mm-mm.
and there was this firm who were the leading at that time in the market for shampoo, and so they went to Jay and said, "Look, we have tried to increase our sales and bottom line, but we feel that the market is saturated and we really need your help." And Jay at the time was, I don't know, maybe charging, six figures for about 2 hours of consultation or whatever. And this is even 15, 20 years back. So Jay goes, and in Jay's words, they took probably about 80% of the time just griping and going through all of the problems. And at the end, Jay says, "Look, I've just got a little more time. There's only three ways to scale a business. So, number one, you increase the number of customers. Number two, you increase the number of sales. Or number three, you increase the frequency of the sale." So they go, "Look, we've increased the number of customers the best we can. We've run huge marketing campaigns and we dominate the market. Our competitors own whatever it is. And no matter how much we pump into advertising, we still can't get a lot more of the demography. So we think we are saturated. So we can't increase the number of customers." So he says, then you increase the price of the sale, the price of the product or service. He said, "Look, in the last couple of years, we've already boosted it, X, whatever. And when we found recently the last boost, people are actually going over to the competitor. So we really need to be careful and we don't want to be doing that." So he said, "You only have one alternative left. You increase the frequency of the sale." And so, how do you increase the frequency of the sale when it comes to shampoo? How many times you're
Yeah,
going to have a bath and
yeah.
use shampoo? And he said, "You don't worry about that. You leave it to me. And all you need to do is design your marketing campaign around three words. And I'll tell you what, I don't even want the $100,000. I'm so confident that it'll work. You give me a share of the profits." And they said, "What are these three words?" And we're coming back to words and writing. And the reason why
Yeah.
I find words so fascinating. And he said the three words, design your marketing campaign around these three words, and it's called rinse and repeat. And he increased the frequency of the sale, right? And
Yeah.
the business just boomed because they spun the marketing
Yeah.
campaign around the fact that the second time you use shampoo, your hair becomes more soft, more silky, there's more sheen and all of that. And it boomed, I don't know, 70s, 80s, whenever it was. Today,
Yeah.
you don't have rinse and repeat, you have conditioner,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the marketing. So I found it fascinating that I can use a set of words in Conrad that can actually open your mind, or I can use a set of words that can actually lock your mind. And that comes to anything, that comes to dating, that comes to business, that comes to friendships. It's a
Yeah.
set of words that can actually open doors or close doors based on
Yeah.
your psychology. And so, yeah, I do run a writing business, and I've dabbled in so many different things, selling
Yeah.
hypnotic headlines to actually increase conversions and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that. That still goes on. I do run a consulting business as well. Sometimes it depends. In the past, I actually used to do a critique of a website, and what do you need to change in your copy, your long form,
Okay.
your short form. But the consulting that I really like is to work with talent acquisition, especially people who are setting up offices in the APAC region when they're recruiting talent, setting up things from scratch, recruiting your C-level executives all the way down to your grassroots, and setting up organizations in the APAC and making them go run a consulting business. Um, I do trading, although that's relatively new to me, but I really, really, really find that so interesting. Make your money work for you, crypto investments, uh, speaking at times, whether it's different organizations, training, speaking,
Yeah, yeah.
and then personally writing as well. I don't, with the writing business, I get other people to do the writing. I
Yeah,
manage
yeah.
the process, but sometimes when I have to chip in, yeah. So just
Yeah.
keep streams
Are
open.
are you noticing AI challenging your writing business at all?
Yeah, I think the general trend is that you'd find copywriting to be
Yeah.
dying away rather quickly.
Yeah.
Because as I said again, the distance between time and money is becoming so vast.
Yeah.
Because I'd say back in the day, you could charge 250, 300 US, take 3-4 hours or
Yeah.
less, and do a resume for, let's say, a VP or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
today you could get that done in 2.5 minutes
Yeah.
via AI.
Yeah.
So it is eating into the market. It is changing different businesses,
Yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
part of the challenge as well. Sometimes when that happens, and you feel the crunch, one of the things that I've struggled with at times is when the real crunch comes back, you go back to some of your safety. Let me become an employee again. Let
Yeah.
me go
Yeah.
look for a job. At least I'll get a
Yeah.
steady income. But I've always found that door is kind of shut for me. Like I said
Yeah.
earlier, the door is
Yeah.
shut. No matter how much you bang your head against it, it
Yeah.
never ends up opening. And you go back and you realize, this is my roots. This is what I want to do. And
Yeah.
sometimes you need to go through the fire in order to bring out a different version of yourself. And that's, when you go out for parties, or you meet some of the crowd here, it's very difficult for you to explain yourself as an entrepreneur to somebody who is an employee, because they're never going to understand the challenges.
Yes.
At one point of the day, I'm doing sales. The
Yeah.
other point of the day, I'm doing marketing. The other point of the day, I'm doing recruitment. The other point
Yep.
of the day, I'm doing admin. The end of the month, I'm doing finances. And then
Yep.
some days I'm doing, and it's hard to explain that to
Yes.
to somebody.
There's no work never ends. It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
There's no vacation. Right. This Jeff has a great segment on the mind of an entrepreneur. Right. It's just busy. Um, I, yeah. Like my sleep schedule is I wake up whenever, and I just work. If I wake up at 3 a.m., I just get to work. If I go to bed at 3 a.m., I've been working till 3 a.m.
Yeah.
There is no start and end time. There is time, and you make use of it.
Yeah, and yeah, see, I can relate to you exactly, because that's the way we work.
Yeah.
And I've often said, in the last 15 years, I've not taken a single day's leave.
Yeah.
Not once.
Yeah.
And I love working on New Year, on Christmas. And a lot of times when you say that, some people say, oh my God, it
Yeah.
must be stressful, whatever. But that's not the point. The point is I enjoy doing what I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
And the reason I've not taken a day's leave, I've had COVID, I've worked through it.
Yeah.
But no problem at all. The reason being is because, one, you've got commitments to clients,
Yeah.
but then two, you're passionate about doing it. When I
Yeah.
say I've never taken a day's leave, it's because I work when I want. Like you said, I get up when I want,
Yeah.
I do what I want. And the other benefits is I have the benefit of being home with, when my kids come from school, I'm there to give them a hug. And there's just so many benefits. And
Yeah.
I'm just glad at the end of the day that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do
this is
do you think you'll make a good employee?
Recently, no, 2024, I've actually asked a few friends for a couple of reasons to see if they could get me into the Australian market. One of them being because I do have a lot of free time, and I wanted to see if I can actually use that time to make money. But then that's the lowest part of income, where you're trading time for money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the second reason being because I did feel a bit of a crunch in my business. And I was like, let me get a steady stream of income here and see how it is, and then break into the consulting world. But that never did work for me, and I never could
Yeah.
get into it. And one of the reasons I decided to pull out was because I've never sat and worked for 8 hours at a desk
Yeah.
for well over a decade, Conrad.
Yeah.
And for me, sitting down at a desk and being tired
Yeah.
is, I don't know if I can do that. And then
Yeah.
second, when you have the liberty of working as an entrepreneur, to go and get instructions from someone else, and well, I can do it, especially when I respect you and all of that, but
Yeah.
it just robs you of that liberty and the
Yes.
freedom and the mindset. So I was like,
Yeah.
I think I probably jumped the gun and tried to get into, get a job again, but just
Yeah.
go back to what I know best and stick it out. And
Yeah.
it's just part of, I don't
Since
think I could be, I wouldn't
yeah,
say never, but I
yeah,
don't think it's in me
it'll
to
be
be,
difficult
it'll be difficult.
because I think we move at a different pace,
Yeah.
which which is sometimes fast. At least it's definitely plenty of sprints, you
Yeah.
know, and sometimes the company might not be set up that way, and
Yeah.
now two people have to agree, and there's back and forth. It's like I was speaking with Sheldon. He's also an entrepreneur
Yeah.
in the US, doing really well, right? And he said it perfectly. He likes to be a dictator. You get things done, right? You want it done. You get things done. There's a problem. You figure it out. You're the boss. You just get to, when you, as an employee, sometimes it's painful to get a simple thing done.
Yeah. But I think, for example, let's say if there was a startup or,
Yeah.
or a company that's, even a few years established and they're looking to grow it in the APAC market or whatever, I wouldn't be interested to be an employee, but as a
Yeah.
consultant,
Yeah.
yes, especially if you're working with the right people,
Yeah.
because micromanagement doesn't work with me.
Yeah.
Macromanagement works where you give me a task and then you go do your day and
Yeah.
then hold me responsible to those results.
Yeah.
And I could work as a consultant in that capacity. And I think that even as entrepreneurs, especially if you have people working for you and people collaborating with you, man management becomes so important because it's up to you to read personalities. It's up to you to quickly identify strengths and weaknesses and then play to those strengths and weaknesses in order for you to get the best ROI. And it also is important for you to be able to read, you may be good at this, but if I put you to work with this responsibility, you're going to be a failure. And it's not because you're bad, it's because I'm bad and I didn't identify talent and put you right. So, yeah, that's one of the things as well. I think I could work as a consultant, but again, I would be very
Yeah.
selective with who I
Yeah.
work with.
I have I have two books for you, man. Especially since you're a reader, I forget the name. As soon as I said that, I forget the name of the second book, but it's been super impactful in scaling teams. The whole premise is I think he was the CEO of IBM, and he figured out how to get work done by just creating small specialized teams,
Hmm.
and everybody breaks up a task, and they just focus on, and they just, when they're done, they just almost like a assembly line, right? But for
Yeah.
business and any task, right? It could be a writing task even, right? Really, really good book in management and how to solve problems and breaking it down. And another book it's called Rework. It's one of my all-time favorite books. If you haven't read it, every chapter is probably 2 pages. So it's a really quick read. And some of the chapters are like meetings are toxic. And he says the 9 to 5 is whatever he says, like, because employees expect people to come to the office, turn on the brains, be creative. At 5 o'clock, turn it off, and go back home. So it's a great book. It'll help you. You probably will agree with most of it. It won't be much of it won't be new to you, but it's a great book to read. And I'll send you some links after we're done.
Yeah.
It's a really great book, dude. So you're in Sydney right now. What is it? Is
No,
it?
Adelaide,
Oh, in Adelaide. In
a
Adelaide.
great
Which part
southern
of
land.
is that in the south?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, from southern India to southern Australia, slightly different. What's the Anglo population where you live? Anybody from Perambur nearby?
Oh, yes. I don't know if you know Grenville, Pereira.
Grenville. Yes.
Yeah. So Grenville lives just down the road, probably 5 minutes. I could walk and get there. And
Nice.
yeah,
Nice.
they
Nice.
welcomed us to Adelaide, and then this. I don't think the population is as big as let's say Melbourne,
Yeah.
but but it's growing, especially after they opened the borders after COVID. It's spread out, but we have a pretty decent Anglo-Indian community and
Yeah.
where I live, and yeah, quite a few of them, Perambur, Georgetown, and those places over there. But yeah, yeah,
It's great, man. I was so surprised to find your sister Sonia is probably 30 to 40 minutes away from me. Like, what are the odds? You know?
yeah,
I was sitting next to her in school, like first to fourth standard, I think. and to find out like, wait, you and I like then went our own ways, and now we're like 1 hour away. That's so cool. I still haven't met up with her, but I messaged her. We're in touch, and hopefully I get to meet her up this year. Dude, anything else, man? Give us some, what are some nuggets you can impart? Like, what was the most painful business story you have? Like, uh, maybe you lost a contract, or what is the art of just asking? Before we even jump to that, right? How did you feel when you got your first yes? Did you like punch the air? I know the thrill of making a sale. First of all, I think I'm addicted to that a little bit,
Yeah.
right? When somebody says yes to me and they trade money, it's like they see value in my offer and my service,
Totally.
right? It's such a thrill,
Totally. That's
you
the
know?
thrill, and that's more than having a drink, more
Yeah,
than doing any other stuff. I mean, that's a high. It's an entrepreneurial high. So I understand what you mean.
yeah,
You asked me a couple of things. Uh,
yes,
the difficult lesson in business and the
yeah.
first sale. Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing. I was Brian Tracy. I don't know if you heard of Brian Tracy, but Brian Tracy spoke about sales, and this was early 20s. And you actually might know this guy. I don't know his name, but let me get. Don't know his last name. I'll give you the first name. So I was sitting at home in Jawarnagar, and a mate of mine, who was White Junior, he brings in about 20 CDs of the Beatles, right? And he says, "Look, my boss just got this from Singapore, and he doesn't listen to this kind of music. He got it as a gift or whatever, and he wants to sell it at $100, right? So that's $2,000, 20 CDs." And so he said, "Calvin, do you want to buy it?" I was like, "No, I don't listen to the Beatles." But I said, so I was looking at ways where you find an opportunity and maximize it and sell.
Yeah.
So at that time, I was working for a bank. I was 22. And I said, "Okay, leave these CDs with me for 2 days, and I'll see what I can do." So my plan was to take the CD and sell it for $200 or
Yeah.
$175, right?
Yeah.
Make what I can, give him the money, see what.
Yeah.
So I took those 20 CDs and I went to the bank, and I spoke to. There were not a lot of Anglos or whatever, but there was one girl. I think she picked up two, whatever it is, had about 18. And I was like, "Where in the world can I go and sell these CDs?" Right? And I decided that I would go to Waikiki Complex. There was this music shop there. I do not know the name of the guy, but I think the first
Yeah.
name was
It was
Gerard.
it was downstairs, right? Yeah.
It was there in the basement, right?
Yeah.
So I take these CDs. I'm 22, 21, 22, something like that. Take these CDs there. And I walk in. I don't know anything about sales content. Okay, I don't know anything. All I know is present whatever.
Yeah.
So there's this one guy there. He's an Anglo guy. I recognize him. Never seen him for over a decade. I think he would be your classmate. His name was Clyde or Clive. He used to have,
Very familiar. Yes, I
right?
know the name. Yes.
I I
Yes.
could probably quote his nickname. I don't know if I should in school. And then you may know better. But anyway, I'll leave that. Whatever. So he was speaking to this guy Gerard. I don't know what they were talking about. So I went in with my CDs after work. And when he took a break in the conversation, I said, "I have these CDs. Would you be interested to buy it?" And that guy, well, I don't know who, I mean, I don't know him. That's the first time. He was so rude to me. He told me off. I do not know what else, but he was so rude. And he basically said, "Get out." In retrospect, I don't know if he meant that he felt like I was trying to eat into his business or sell in his shop or whatever. I was crossing the line. I
Yeah.
had no
Yeah.
idea, but he was rude. He told me to get out. And I was, crestfallen, taken aback. I put the CDs in my bag and I was about to go out. And Clyde taps me on his shoulder and he says, "Wait out." So I wait out and he says, "Man, I'd like to take those CDs from you, but I don't have any money." So I was like, I'm not giving the CD. So he's like, "Why don't you come to my office?" And he gave me whatever, Roy Peta or Paris or one of those places. And I said, "All right." So the next day, put the CDs in my bag, finished work, drove there. This guy was in his office. It was his office. He comes out, and I told him the price, how much I wanted. And he comes out, and he tries to negotiate with me for like $125 on each CD, and I was so pissed off. And he
Yeah.
could see it in my face. And
Yeah.
I was like, mate, you never asked me to come all this way to do this to me. And he was like, okay, 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 okay. And I think he ended up taking whatever, 10 or 15 CDs, and he paid me the rate that I wanted. And I went back and I was so overjoyed. Forget the rejection,
Yeah.
forget people being rude to me or whatever. I
Yeah.
had cash in my hand because
Yep.
of me being innovative. So that's my first
Yep.
sale. And you never forget those things.
Yep.
Most difficult stuff that I've taken in business, I'll give you one financial and then one where I've been stupid, a couple of times. Um, One, this didn't cost me because again, I remember once, as I said, Jose, very harsh. And one day, he's a Spaniard. So one day, I don't know what the reason was, but I lost it. I was in my mid 20s, and this guy's a multimillionaire, and I let it rip. I blasted him for, I don't know, 8, 10 minutes, and there's only two consequences. One, get out, you're done. Or two, he gives me a piece of his mind.
Yeah.
I go through that entire episode with him, and then he stops, looks at me, and he says, "That's the Latino in you," and he walks away. And he walks away. So what do you do with that kind of response? So I
Yeah.
mean, so that could have been a really stupid decision because you do not want to break certain relationships. But
Yeah.
I'm thankful that he knew how to mentor and
Yeah.
understand one. But in financial, so this is, I mean, we probably trace the year back, but 50 no no 13 2013 2014 somewhere in that. I had a client reach out to me. He's a new client, and he says to me, my rate's always in USD. So he says, I want you to do ABC. I said, these are my rates. He said, all right, I'll be willing to pay you, or would you be willing to take the payment in Bitcoin? Right? Bitcoin at that time is less than 2 grand, 2000 USD,
Yep.
right? And you can get paid in fragments. So for me, again, I don't check with God, I don't pray about it, nothing. I'm just using my business intellect. And I look at India, and India is like, has no stance on crypto, right? There's still, it's still difficult in crypto. So, and I had no plans to go out of India at the time. So one, what am I going to do with Bitcoin? Two, Bitcoin, even at that point of time, is relatively unknown, right? It's a risk.
Yeah.
And at least USD, I'm able to gamble on. And plus, with the conversion rate, I know I'm going to have money in the pocket. So I made the right decision and I say, all right, pay me in USD.
Yeah.
And fast forward,
Yeah.
Bitcoin is now over touching 100 grand USD.
Yep.
And even if I had some of those fragments,
Yep.
okay, we did business for a bit. I
Yep.
could have had, even if I had one Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, I mean, well, but the thing is, if that had to work,
Yeah.
and if I had to understand Bitcoin better, I could have because
Yeah.
my industry is where it's also crypto friendly. So I could have got paid, in Bitcoin again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you look back at the worst financial decision,
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
that's
That's
one. Yeah.
that's gotta hurt. Yeah. No, I had some Bitcoin as well, and I pulled out too early, took it out. It's like this is not getting anywhere, and I probably
How
had
much
like
was it?
I had like 3 Bitcoins, dude. Was it
Oh,
double? Yeah.
and how much did you cash out for?
I think like 5 grand. I just bought a Mac or something. I was like, yeah, this is good enough, right? I thought that was max. It was going to fluctuate. It was good enough. I met my goal. I'll pull it up. Like my friends gave other friends Bitcoin as gifts. Like back then it was $1, right? Here's a Bitcoin as a gift, and that's the
Yeah.
most expensive gift anybody has given you. That,
I hope he
yeah,
kept it. Whoever got that gift.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Dude,
But that's even the ebbs and flows, even when
yeah,
it hit 20
yeah,
in 2020 or whatever, you were like, that's the peak.
yeah,
But then now it's climbed to 100,
yeah,
and they're saying it'll push to 250,000, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I still have some, and it's what I have. The fragment is pretty, is still way like 10 times more
Yeah.
than what I put in at that point
Yeah.
in time, right? But dude, I appreciate your time. You're a great storyteller.
Oh, thanks. You're kind.
Thanks for sharing your stories, man. Enjoyed it. I love talking with entrepreneurs. I get goosebumps, like just bouncing ideas off, sharing stories of excitement, joy, and pain. It's all fun. I love it, dude. Best of luck in whatever you do. I relate with the multiple streams of income, and never being bored because you're always looking for the next thing. Thanks, Calvin, for chatting, dude.
Yeah.
Appreciate
One
you.
question, Conrad. How
Yes.
come you decided to go and launch the podcast a few months back? Did the Rogan experience have anything to do with it, with him having Trump and Musk on and actually swinging the election? Um, was that a kickstart for you to actually say, "I'll pull the trigger now and get it going"?
No, man. It's, you know what? Of all the things I did, this was the least thought behind
Yeah.
it,
All right.
right? I like the only thing I bought was this microphone. It just came. Hey, I should just do a podcast and talk to Anglo Indians, and that was it. Bought a
Yeah.
mic, and I was like, asked a few people, and like they said yes, and it was like making a sale, you know. And I was like, whoa, these people actually want to talk to me. And then I'm figuring out the value, right, as well. And I see the value as I do it. You know, I see the value in talking to people and highlighting, even if it wasn't just Anglo-Indian themed, right? It's just, I just see so much value in hearing stories. And I love that storytelling. I love hearing stories from people, you know, so the value is coming. It wasn't like I see the value, let's start a business. I just like literally a 2-second idea.
Yeah.
You know, and I spoke to, and I'm still speaking to friends, right? Most people, right? I'm just speaking to friends. I've spoken to some I don't know, which is also great. Making a sale to a stranger is. I've done crazy things with. I've emailed Cliff Richard and I got rejected. Just so you know. But,
Really?
yes. but right. So that's the thrill, right? You get to do the crazy, stupid things, and
Yeah.
rejection. I got the rejection letter, and I was smiling like Cliff Richard said no to me.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. You have to have a thick skin when you get into this business.
Yeah.
And
I
take
love it.
rejection.
Like
Yeah.
how many people got rejected by Cliff Richard? I did. Yeah.
True. That's one way of looking at it. Yeah.
I love it, man. Yeah, that's about it, dude. And I appreciate you, man. I really am thankful. You're a great story. I think we should. I would definitely do another one with you later on and just chat some more.
Oh,
man.
yes, man.
Yeah.
That's good. That's an encore. But thanks so much, Conrad, for having me on. And I'm sure, you have an interesting story as well, because I know you've always, even back in the day, maybe over a decade back when you started Pepper Water, and I think it hit off, and it was like,
Yes.
what was one of what's it like to be an Anglo-Indian, or some
Yeah.
famous Anglo-Indian sayings, and it popped
Yeah.
up there as well. And
Yeah.
you've always had something to do with the Anglo-Indian community,
Yeah.
so that's good, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome,
Thanks
dude.
for having me on, yeah.
You bet. I love it, man. Thank you.